In association with Get a Tax Rebate, 1895 Sports, Mesa Vienna Aesthetics, CDX Security.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Oddball Woody Show with another great guest this week. This week's guest it's probably the type of, basically, if I wasn't a rugby league player professionally for a living, then I wanted to be a comedian. But everybody knows I'm certainly not funny enough to be that. And it was sort of a running joke with me when I was playing rugby. I could go into the lads and I become a Tommy Cooper by mistake because I could never get the punchlines right, and it wasn't designed that way. I just could never get a punchline right, and it becomes sort of funny without even trying to be funny. But this guy's an Australian. He's rugby league mad, and he's done a great job so far for the branding, not only for the Warrington Wolves, but for rugby league in general. He, as I say, he's an Aussie. He's a comedian. If that's what we can call the Aussies these days, because the humour's a little bit different from us. But it's Adam Mills. Welcome, Adam.
Pleasure to be here.
No worries, mate. Like I say, it's for me, one thing I would love to be is a comedian. I'm the type of guy who wants to be known as the funny guy in the room, and I just can't get it. So I might be hitting you up for a few tips at some point. But how did you get into comedy? What was it that sort of that took you down that route? Did you think it was a natural at it, or was there a specific reason that took you down comedy?
I always loved it. Like I remember being on like my dad worked for Qantas, and he would come back from overseas with comedy albums, and we would listen to there was a guy called Alan Sherman who did song parodies, but they were like there was like "Hello Marta, hello Father, here I am at Camp Granada," and so he would take kind of classical songs and just make write song parodies about them. And then there was a Peter Sellers album. There were a couple of Bill Cosby albums. When it was time for TV, it would be Benny Hill, or it would be MASH, or it would be Dick Emery. So comedy was kind of, I guess it was, my dad loved comedy, and that rubbed off on me. But I never really thought it was something that I could do. Like if we did a school play, I'd try and do the funny role or make whatever it was funny. If I did debating at high school. I'd always throw in jokes. So I really wanted to be a comedian. But there was a flight, I remember, a kid's, like a family holiday when I was about maybe 9 years old. And because my dad worked for Qantas, we used to get free trips. We'd get a free flight every year, but we weren't guaranteed of sitting together. We just got wherever the spare seats were. So I was a few rows in front of my parents, and I put on the headphones and I started listening, and they had a comedy channel. And I'd never heard a comedy. I'd never heard comedy in public. And apparently I got up on my seat and went, "Mom, Dad, there's a man being funny on the radio." And they were like, "That's good. Just listen to him." So I listened to it, and then I listened to it again, and then I listened to it again because it would rewind. And by the end of the flight, I must have listened to it like 4 or 5 times. And I just really clicked with it. I really, really loved it. And so I guess I was about, I think it was maybe my 19th birthday that I went. A friend of mine used to go to the Sydney Comedy Store and watch the open mic nights. I didn't even know what an open mic night was. And I went and watched one night and went, "So anyone can get up and just have a crack?" And he went, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life." So as soon as I could, I took a chance and I got up there and I wasn't very good. Genuinely not very. The first night I got up there, I did a lot of jokes about sex because I thought that's what comedians did. I was 19, I was a virgin, and I was doing jokes about sex. And I walked off stage, and the MC walked back out and said, "Isn't it funny the guys that talk about it the most do it the least?" And that got a bigger laugh than anything I said. So, but I was just convinced I wanted to go back and I wanted to try it again. And it's just, when you've got that thing in you, and like, I've spent a lot of time now around sports people, whether they be rugby league players or tennis players. I spent time around actors, around musicians. We've all got that weird little thing in our heads that other people don't have, that's kind of instinct and a little bit of madness all combined. Mine happens to be a comedy madness. You know, you would have had the sporting and the rugby league madness. There's a gene in there. I don't know what it is, but there's a gene in there that makes you do that thing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. You just took the words out of my mouth, really. I was thinking exactly the same thing. As you were saying, you was watching the comedy and you'd watch it over and over and over again. I would be exactly the same with rugby league matches. So as a kid, I'd just be watching Challenge Cup finals. I'd be watching games and I'd just be rewinding them and rewind them. And when I wasn't watching them, I'd be thinking about watching them. And it would just, it's like you say, it's great if you're a kid, because I think we're quite fortunate if we do find that passion, because a lot of people don't. And, they're still sort of searching for it in the 30s, the 40s and the 50s. And I think if we can tap into that from a young age, we get to live the life of our dreams. And I suppose, for me, rugby league's a tough way to earn a living, don't get me wrong, but you never work a day in your life if you enjoy what you do.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I was talking to, so my dad passed away a few years ago, but I was talking to, he used to work for Qantas and fly around the world. And I was talking to one of his mates who used to fly with him. And I said, I've got this amazing job. I get to travel around the world. I get to do stand-up comedy. And he said, mate, your dad and I used to say that to each other all the time. We'd be sitting beside a pool in Bahrain because we'd just flown in from Melbourne and we were about to fly out to London. And we'd go, what a great job. Don't tell anyone, but this is the best job in the world. And so I think, when you see your parents do something like that, maybe it does trickle down a little bit. And when you grow up seeing your parents doing something that they love, then it makes you think, well, okay, maybe I can find something that I love.
Do you think they would have said that if they were flying into Manchester, though? Not Bahrain. Might have been a different story, I think. Destination might have had a bit of a thing with that. But,
I can't imagine he would have spent too many days, sitting by the pool, sunning himself if they'd flown into Manchester.
Can just imagine him in Manchester thinking, what did we do to deserve this? Nice grey clouds. But, you took me back to something, actually, what you said when you went to the comedy store. I remember my first visit to a comedy store. I was 21 years of age.
Yeah.
And we all went over there and we went watching. And John Bishop was on. It was before John Bishop had actually got big.
Yeah.
And exactly the same thing with him. He was good, but he wasn't that good. So when we watched him, and at the time, it was an outing for the Great Britain Rugby League squad. So we all went to the comedy show, and you know what rugby lads are like. There's 30 of us in a room, and we're sort of being quite vocal and, giving them the hecklers and stuff.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, John Bishop gets on TV and he's absolutely killing it. But are those setbacks? How did you deal with those? Because I can, it's hard when you're a performer. When you get criticised, it can be quite hard to be resilient and sort of come back from it. It can knock your confidence. How did you deal with that?
I think you need one of those gigs really early in your career to test whether or not you really want to do this as a job, because we all have them. I think it was my second gig, maybe. So that first gig at the comedy store went okay. The second gig was a few months later. And I remember making a joke off the top of the show that I thought was a pretty good joke. It got a pretty good laugh. And then this guy down the front went, mate, that joke's about 14 years old. And that was the joke that I'd come up with. Maybe other people had done it in the past. I didn't know. So I looked at him and said, mate, what a coincidence. So's your girlfriend. Got a round of applause, like boom. And I was like, I mean, this is easy. This is great. And then he went me and he just niggled me. And I bottled it. I absolutely bottled it. I'd never been heckled like that before. Like the first thing was just instinct, but then I didn't know what to do. It was a death. It was an absolute death. And I went backstage and one of the older comics said, listen, you hit him really hard, really early. And it was a great line. said, but you probably went a bit too hard too early. And he said, and also you've got to have a backup. You can't just have one line. You've got to have more. And so I went home and I was devastated. Absolutely. I was just, oh my God, I can't do this. And of all things, I went to a party with a group of friends the next night, and I was really fragile and wounded. But I relaxed at the party, and I probably got it out of my system a little bit much and became the funny guy at the party and went, no, I know I can do this. I know I can do this. And so I went back again. And I think it's good for a comedian to have one of those setbacks, and a lot of those setbacks, because I've died heaps of times. I've, in much the same way as you went to the Comedy Store with your mates and you remember John Bishop being okay, there's a bunch of stags who had a stag night at a golf club in Cork about 20 years ago who probably watch me on TV and go, I mean, that guy was awful. That guy was, do you remember when he ruined your stag night, mate? It was one of the worst gigs I've ever had, to the point where I finished the gig, and I say finished, it finished when one of them put his hand up and said, listen, it's not going well. How about give it another 5 minutes, but if it's not getting any better, we'll just call it quits, all right? So I did my 5 minutes, and then the stag walked out on stage with a pint of Guinness and went, all right, this is awful. If you can down your pint quicker than I can down my pint, we'll pay you. If not, you have to come drinking with us for the rest of the night. And so down the pint, he's down his, he won. And he went, right, you come in drinking. And I went, sure, but I've got to get changed. I'm in a suit. You guys are all in normal clothes. Let me go back to the hotel and get changed, and I'll meet you at the club. And he went, right, but we booked the room, so we know you're in room 16, so don't run out on us. And the only thing that saved me was I was in room 12, and that he got it wrong. So I went back to the hotel, went out to a comedy club nearby, got drunk, went back, and then I heard them banging on the door of room 16 at about 3 a.m. So we've all had those gigs, and we will all have them again. The thing is, the more you do comedy, the better your deaths get. So a bad gig for me now won't be as shocking as it was 20 years ago. But, every now and again, that's the joy and the horrible thing about comedy is that it can turn. You're a good rugby league player. You're a good rugby league player. You can have an off day, but you won't completely forget how to play rugby league. Whereas there's always something in the back of a comedian's mind that goes, what if tonight's the night I'm not funny anymore?
Yeah.
So there's always that fear that you're going to lose it.
Yeah. Do you still get bad nights? Because it's hard to imagine that you'd still go through that with being a celebrity and you're on the TV and people don't expect. I mean, the reason I asked that question is I always remember a presentation night for the Warrington Wolves end of season presentation night, and we had Mick Miller, the comedian, and he just absolutely died on his arse. Nobody was listening to him, and Mick Miller's a famous comedian, and he is a funny guy, but he just didn't fit that atmosphere that night. So have you experienced that like recently?
Yeah, I would say corporate gigs are the worst. Like comedy gigs where people have come to see a comedy show and they're there to see you. They know what they're in for. They've paid money to come and see you. They're fine because people are invested in it. It's those nights like Mick Miller where you turn up at. There are a lot of corporate awards nights in London, and I'll be asked to MC the genuinely like the brown paper packaging awards or the pharmaceutical company of the year awards, and you have to do a 15-minute routine off the top, and then you hand out all these awards. And there's a point where being on the telly helps, and absolutely they're like, a whole bunch of pharmaceutical reps are going, oh, that's the guy from The Last Leg, and it's fine. But I think honestly, I haven't done a corporate. The last corporate I did was a couple of years ago, and I had an ear infection. I'd been working on The Last Leg all day, had an ear infection, so I wasn't feeling great. Turned up, it was at the Grosvenor Hotel. I had a room booked, so I went and slept for a couple of hours. That's how bad I felt. But again, as you say, sometimes the setting isn't quite right. And there was the awards this night had been handed out by Hugh Edwards, who's a BBC news, reader. And he was really funny whilst he handed out the awards. So the audience were going, well, this is great. We've got a comedy act and the guy hosting out the award all in one. This is awesome. And he finished and they loved him. They'd had a big laugh for the night. And then he said, thank you very much. And then he left the stage. And so the audience went, great, well, that's it. The night's over. We've had our entertainment. They all start getting up and chatting. And then someone on the side of the stage went, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your comedian for the night, Adam Hill. So I walked out to a room full of people who had already had a good night. And they were getting up, they were going to the toilet. And then those that did see me were like, well, if the newsreader was that funny, this guy's going to be hilarious. And then I did my first joke and realized that the ear infection meant I actually had lost hearing in one ear, so I couldn't hear the audience properly. And it was okay. It was just okay, but I kind of walked off stage. I knew it was bad because I was sweating. They call it flop sweat. When you're flopping, you're sweating. And I was just drenched in sweat. And I genuinely haven't done a corporate gig since.
Right. Oh, so it got you that much, did it?
That was, I would say, 3 years ago. And they pay well. I've got to say, like, compared to a stand-up comedy gig, they pay really well. But I kind of walked away from that and thought, do you know what? At that time, my wife and kids were living here in London. And I thought, is it worth it for a night away from the kids? Yeah. And now they've moved back to Australia, but I still think, is it worth it? Do I want to go through the stress for that much money? So yeah, it's there. That's why they pay you the money. That's why they pay you so much for them. But every comedian has, often I'll get calls from other comics going, oh mate, I just had the worst corporate gig. And then we'll kind of talk each other off the ledge.
Good. Speaking about, we just spoke then off camera just before we hit the record button, but obviously you've got a disability. Yeah. You've got a prosthetic leg. It's something I didn't even realise when you was part of the Warrington Wolves disability team that you had this, and I just thought you was the able-bodied player promoting Warrington Wolves. And then someone said, well, he's got a prosthetic leg. He's so he qualifies. And then they said the TV show is The Last Leg. And I put two and two together and went, yeah, no, I get it. But it's not something that you speak about. And again, interesting reading. I didn't know that, but then you don't use it in your comedy routine.
Well, I do occasionally now. I didn't when I started out doing comedy. I did a joke about my foot one night very early on in my career, and I say career. I was still an open micer. I wasn't even being paid at this point, I don't think. And an older comedian took me aside, and he said, his words were, he said, "You're not good enough to talk about your foot yet." I said, "What do you mean?" He went, "You're still working out how to be funny, what you're trying to say, how you're trying to say it. Talking about having a disability is a massive thing, and you're not good enough to talk about it yet." He said, "So ply your trade," were his words, "ply your trade, work out how to be funny, work out what you want to say about your foot, because you're also not saying anything. You're just going, oh, I've got a foot, isn't that funny?" And it said, then he said, when you've worked out what you want to say about it and how to say it effectively, you'll be a much better comedian. And it was amazing advice. And I genuinely didn't talk about it on stage for 13 years, to the point where, other comics had no idea that I was missing a right foot. And it was only after, well, two things happened. I was in Edinburgh and I was nominated for the Perrier Award, which is the biggest award you can get at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And the first thing that happened made me think was, right, I must now know how to do this. If I've been nominated for an award, I must have learned some stuff. And then not long after that, 9/11 happened. And I found I was going through airports, and airport security guards were getting really worried about my foot. And because it would set off the metal detector. But when I said, oh, it's a prosthetic, they'd get too scared to check it and go, oh, mate, just go through. No, it's all right, go through. And I was like, well, check. No, it's all right. And I thought, I need to I need to talk about this. I need to let people know it's okay. You don't have to be scared about meeting someone with a disability. So then those two things that this older comedian had told me, wait until you get good at it and then work out what you want to say, both came off. I was nominated for the award, which made me think, okay, I must be good at it. And then I realized I have something to say, and that is, it's okay. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to feel a bit awkward about it, but don't be scared. So, but then there was this weird thing of, so I would go on stage, and the next show that I did, I talked about having a prosthetic foot, and friends of mine in the crowd were saying that people around them, some of them were getting like angry, going, well, why hasn't he talked about it before now? as if I'd held it as a secret or something. So then I did, the next show I did was all about my foot. And now it comes up every now and again. Do you know what? I've just realized I stopped talking about my foot. So I did a show about it, got it all out there, and it was fine. And then I moved on to other stuff. And then after the last leg became really big during the Paralympics in 2012, I went on tour, and suddenly all these people were coming to see me that had never seen me do stand-up comedy before. And they wanted me to talk about the foot. And there was a part of me going, oh man, that show was like 10 years ago. I've moved on. It was like being a band and a whole bunch of people had just discovered an album you released a decade ago. And now you've got to do all the old hits. So I kind of brought it back in, but yeah, I don't really talk about it as much anymore. And certainly on the last leg, that comes up every now and again, but not all the time.
Could you tell us how it come about?
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, it's no good story. I was just born without a right foot. And in fact, it wasn't, I've got a foot, I've got an ankle, but it's a deformity. So there's a little ankle, but there's not much more than that. So I can walk on it. I can actually take the prosthetic off and I can walk, but one leg's longer than the other. So it throws my back out. So I can't do that for long periods of time. But and the prosthetic was really there just to like lengthen my legs really, and help me walk properly. So because of that, I never really considered myself disabled. Like I played rugby league at high school up until about maybe 12 or 13 and maybe 14. And two things happened, I think. I think it was kind of becoming obvious that I couldn't keep up. And I was a little worried about other kids tackling the prosthetic because it is quite hard. But then also the rugby league teacher left and they started playing rugby union and I didn't understand rugby union. I said, I don't want any part of that. But I also played tennis the whole way as well. And I played able-bodied tennis. I played A grade. I ended up being a tennis coach as well. So yeah, it never really stopped me doing anything. And I never wanted to, like when I was about 12, I was asked if I'd considered, trialing for the Paralympics. And I didn't think I was disabled enough, so I didn't go. And I thought, well, there's people there with no legs. I've only got half a foot. That's not fair. I didn't realize there were different categories and all that kind of stuff. So I played able-bodied sport right up until I was about probably 22, 23. I stopped playing competitive tennis. So I never really saw myself as being disabled. And it was only when I went to the Paralympics in 2008 to cover it for Australian TV that I kind of went, oh my God, these guys don't see themselves as disabled either.
Yeah,
they're just athletes. And we were even told, like the chef de mission of the Australian team said to all the journalists, don't cover this as disability sport because it's not. It's sport. It's elite athletes at the top of their game that just happen to be disabled, but that's not what this is about. And it kind of opened my eyes to disability sport and made me think, oh, I should have trialed for the Paralympics all those years ago. And then 2012 was the big one though at London. Watching Paralympics GB come into the stadium, fireworks going off, David Bowie's "You Can Be Here, We Can Be Heroes," a full stadium. I kind of watched that and went, like, I honestly went, man, I wish I was disabled.
Yeah.
I kind of went, oh yeah, right. And I feel really guilty now because I only wanted to be part of the club when the club looked really cool.
I think you're spot on there. I think the 2012 Paralympic Games is probably one of the more symbolic times for disability sports. And I think it really, because that was my next question, growing up with a disability, you've sort of answered the question really, because you said you didn't see yourself a disabled child or have a disability. But how was it? How was it growing up? Would kids treat you differently, even though you played able-bodied sport, which I think is such a positive attribute, and what an attitude to have as a young kid. And I think it's like you say, when you meet people with a disability, they don't see themselves with a disability, which is really positive. But how was it growing up back in then? Because I will say you're a little bit older than me, but what was it like? What was it like growing up in Australia and having the disability?
Well, I didn't find. I mean, for me, I didn't find I was treated any different. Partly because the disability didn't stop me from doing anything, and if I wore trousers or jeans or whatever, I didn't look any different. And kids in particular will always pick on the kid that looks different. Having said that, though, like my parents, when I was born, took me to see a specialist who said, well, he'll never walk, so don't expect that to happen. And my mum was devastated, and she went back to her GP, and he said, oh, that guy's an idiot, go and see this other guy. And she went and saw this other specialist who went, of course he'll walk, of course he will, we'll find a way. And it, so back then that was 1970, medicine, medical science they didn't know what to do with people with disabilities sometimes. So, but for me, again, because it was such a minor disability, it didn't really stop me doing anything. So I never really felt any different. I remember playing rugby league once and hearing one of the other kids in a tackle just yell out, "Careful, he's autistic." which offended me on so many levels. And the main level was, don't treat me any differently. I didn't want anyone going easy on me. That's the worst thing you can do. And now, funnily enough, that's one of the joys of playing disability rugby league. So as you well know, I play for the Warrington Wolves disability team. And the worst thing you can do when you're playing against a disabled player is go easy on them. That is more offensive than anything else. You hit us, we played, I remember we played at ANZ Stadium and I got smashed by one of the able-bodied guys on the Rabbitohs team. And I was talking to Adam Reynolds from the Rabbitohs not long after that. And he went, mate, I saw that. Is that in the rules? And I went, yeah, that's why we play. We play so that we can be, not treated with kid gloves or in cotton wool.
Yeah. It just reminded me when when I finished playing, I did some boxing, and there was a girl in the gym there, and she was exactly the same. She was like, why are you taking it easy? Because I'm a girl,
Right.
and that's sort of a similar type of thing. You do tend to, you want to take it easy, but, going back to the disability rugby, watching the Rabbitohs game and I've actually watched some of the games, the Warrington Wolves games, when they've been involved in some of the teams, and
it's
absolutely brutal. It's brutal. It's how can I explain it? To me, some of the hits seem bigger than they do when you're watching when you're watching the Super League teams. They just run at you at 100 mile an hour, and you're just powering through people, and it's just amazing to watch.
It's really liberating for us because, I mean, I put padding, I found, but this is the interesting thing. I was worried about people injuring themselves off my prosthetic. And one of the guys in our team turned up, and he had a motorbike accident. So he's got a metal plate in his arm. So he bought an MMA arm guard for fighting. And I went, oh my God, that's an amazing idea. And he went, why don't you get a couple of leg guards? So I bought 2 MMA leg guards. I put one on the back and one on the front. So now when I run, I'm not thinking, oh God, what if someone hurts themselves? I can run full on into them. But yeah, I'll be honest, I think it surprised me how physical the sport ended up being. The first game we played was against Leeds, and I thought, oh yeah, this will be good, and it'll be hard, but it won't be too full on. But oh my God, I mean, I had a target on my back. I think the only thing English people like hitting harder than an Australian is an Australian off the television.
yeah, 100%. You'll have a target on your back, like you say. You're an Aussie, and you're a comedian, and people will want to make a name for themselves, but
Absolutely. But the highest compliment I got was that would only happen in the first game against each team. So the first time we played Leeds, first time we played Wakey, they were like, "That's the guy off the telly. Smash him, see if he can take it." And then the second time we played them, I kind of felt like they'd gone, "Do you know what he can? How about we play rugby now?"
What made you have an interest in rugby league? Was it from a young age? Because I've been to Australia a few times myself, and I know how big Australia is with rugby league. You know, it's absolutely massive, and you know the exposure that they get over there is considerably more than we do in the UK. But what sort of made you gravitate to rugby league as a sport? And is it your favourite sport?
I think it is. So I grew up in Sydney, which is, you know, the home of rugby league in Australia. When I was born, my dad came into the hospital when I was 3 days old with a red and green toy South Sydney rabbit, because he grew up in Rabbitohs territory. His dad grew up in Rabbitohs territory. His dad worked alongside John Sattler, who's one of the greatest Rabbitohs players ever. So South Sydney was in my blood, and that's all I wanted to do was play for the Rabbitohs. So I loved rugby league. Played, you know, backyard, on the street, at school. I mean, we played, I guess it was touch footy up until I was 10 or 11, and then got to high school and then played able-bodied rugby league. But also at the same time, my parents, I think they could see the future of, you know, how far I could possibly get with one leg playing rugby league. So they pushed me towards playing tennis as well. So I did both. So I'd play rugby league. It wasn't the sport that I played every weekend. And I think that's why I've embraced it so much now. Because I had a good crack at tennis. I gave it everything I had. I was never going to be a professional player. Like I said, I played A grade. I coached. I went as far as I could go with tennis, but I never did that with rugby league. I always felt like I didn't go as far as I could. And so I guess it was 2017. I just got a tweet from someone saying, "Did you see that the South Sydney Rabbitohs disability team won last weekend?" And I was like, I didn't even know there was a Rabbitohs disability team. This is amazing. So I kind of called the people up behind it and said, "Look, you know, what can I do to help you guys out?" And in the back of my head, it was like, "Can I play? Can I come and play?" And the guy went, "Well, you're in London. It's going to be tricky to play." But they had just been contacted by the Warrington Wolves, who had found out about Disability Rugby League. And they said, well, maybe Warrington can set up England's first team. So they put me in touch with the Wolves. And then I've had this whole new lease of life. Like, I mean, and you know yourself, it's not just, it's really appropriate that it was the Wolves that did this, because the foundation in particular, the Warrington Foundation, is, you know, disability football teams, dance classes for the elderly, dementia-friendly cafe. The Warrington Wolves Foundation, it's like its tentacles just go out through all of Warrington. So, which, as you well know, is a rugby league town anyway. So, I contacted a guy who directed some of the early series of The Last Leg, and said, "Look, I think there might be a documentary in this." And John McKenna is his name. He's from St Helens, so he's a rugby league tragic as well. And he went, "All right, well, let's take a camera everywhere and let's see what comes of it." And I'm so glad we did, and I'm so glad it ended up being in Warrington, because any other club, I don't think it would have had the same feel that Warrington had.
Yeah, I completely agree there in terms of the Warrington Wolves Foundation. I mean, Neil Kelly and Debbie Blackburn do some absolutely fantastic work within the community. And like you said, rugby league in Warrington, it's a rugby league town, but it's so much more than that, because they bring a lot of things to the community, and it's a shame really, because it doesn't get as much recognition as it should do. You know, everybody sort of, and I've been guilty of this. When you're part of the first team, it's sort of that's the highlight of the club. But when you sort of step away from the game and you see what goes on behind the scenes, you know, and the hard work that goes in there, it's just fantastic. And I think personally, and I'm not saying this just because I'm an ex-Warrington player and I spent a lot of time there, I do genuinely think that Warrington are leading the way in terms of the disability rugby and everything else that they throw out in the community.
Yeah, they jumped behind it so well from the get-go. As you say, Neil Kelly was right there. And then, but what was great was like Leeds came on board really early as well. I think they came down to one of our training sessions maybe and went, right, well, we're going to form a team. And then Wakey came to the first game that we played. And what's amazing is the RFL have really jumped on board. And this is where the sport's different here than in Australia. The NRL don't have a lot to do with the Physical Disability Rugby League. It's kind of a separate thing that was just set up. Whereas here, the RFL have really jumped on board. And there's, you know, I'm on the board. We have board meetings. Barry McDermott is part of the board meetings as well. And it's amazing. You know, we've had a meeting this week about a possible Physical Disability Rugby League World Cup next year. But that's not where it ends. Like talking to the guys at the RFL, Chris Godfrey as well, who was at the Leeds Foundation, they're talking 20 years ahead of disability rugby league in Great Britain, and how do we get future pathways, and how do we get younger players involved, and how do we get a national team going? So there's been a real kind of groundswell, and that's also not just Warrington. That's rugby league is what I've learned over here, but rugby league in particular in England. Like, as you well know, it's not the biggest sport here. And because of that, it's got a more community feel to it, and it's got a more of a kind of social responsibility about it, I think. And, you know, even the Rugby League World Cup next year, it's got wheelchair, women's, men's, and possibly physical disability rugby league all going on at the same time. It's a really, really inclusive and progressive and family community-based sport. So I've honestly have a new love for rugby league from being here in England.
At Get a Tax Rebate, we make it easy for you or your business to claim back thousands of pounds in tax. Most people, like Jane and Philip, don't realise that they are owed money from HMRC, so they never claim. All you need to do is fill out a simple form on our website and we'll do the rest. It's that simple. We've also helped business owners claim back millions of pounds in research and development R&D tax credits. So if you're working in a business or own one, contact us today to see if we can help you claim back tax and improve your cash flow. Get a Tax Rebate, your tax refund concierge.
$18.95 Sports on State of Mind, the ultimate lineup.
Macy Vienna Aesthetics, based in Wigan. For all your wrinkle treatments, dermal fillers, lip enhancement, energy boost injections, immune boost injections, please visit us on Facebook or Instagram at Macy Vienna Aesthetics.
CDX Security, proudly supporting Rugby League.
Yeah, I mean, watching the documentary on Channel 4, found it so fascinating because when it spoke to the different characters within the team and the players, and you found out what the disabilities were, and then you get so emotional because you think, wow, these people just wanted to play rugby league. They had childhood dreams, you know, to be a rugby league player, but never got that opportunity because they wasn't able. But now they get a chance. And, you know, there was, was there someone from, was it Plymouth that they drove up from?
Oh, yes. Yeah, from Devon, yeah.
Yeah, from Devon. And you're just like, wow, this guy's got an opportunity. The Warrington Wolves have set up this opportunity so this person can live a childhood dream of playing rugby league. And it made you very emotional because you take things for granted basically, and you don't realise that how fortunate, you know, I sometimes forget how fortunate I've been to been able to do what I have for a living and been fortunate enough. I mean, I probably qualify more than you for the disability rugby now. With one, I've lost my testicle. I cut my finger off when I was 15, so I've probably got. So, mate, I'm here. I'm here if you want to make marquee signing. I'm here. So I'm ready to go. I'm going to make a comeback. But it is an emotional thing to see people to get an opportunity to do something that they love.
And that's the joy of disability sport. Like that's what I saw in Beijing in 2008, and I knew was going to happen in London in 2012. Excuse me, and I knew would happen for anyone that comes along and sees a game of disability rugby league. And I think one of the most satisfying things for me. So when we played in the first PDRL, World Club Challenge at ANZ Stadium, we got Joey Johns to play with us, Andrew Johns, because ex-Warrington player, and it felt. And for anyone who's watching who doesn't know, each disability team at the moment has 2 able-bodied players, and they facilitate. They can't run more than 10 meters. They can't score. They can't kick. They're there to create a gap, give an offload, and maybe chase down someone who's broken through that the rest of us can't catch. And Joey played with us, and I saw him interviewed on Channel 9 afterwards, and he basically said the same as you. And he said you could see he was really affected by it. And he said, his words were, "You get caught up in the BS of professional sport, and
100%.
When you see guys like this who, won't let anything stop them playing the game that you've played your whole life, you kind of realize how much it means to them." And I'm just really proud that disability sport. I had a big chat with Claire Balding about this in Rio. We were coming back from the closing ceremony in Rio, and we were just talking about how, the power of sport generally. Sport's like a soap opera, but disability sport is like a soap opera with a tragedy written into it. And it's just, it's so powerful. And the more people that see disability sport generally, the more lives will be enhanced by it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look at the times we're living in at the moment with, with this pandemic, with coronavirus. Sport got taken away from us for a while. And then I think people realised how much of a community and how much it brings us together. And now to be able to have, different levels of sport, we've now got, in Rugby League, female teams playing. We've got disability teams playing. We've got able-bodied teams playing. And it's so diverse now, and I think times are changing considerably. They really are. Growing up, I feel it were different. I feel it were different. There wasn't opportunities for people who were who had disabilities.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's why you become emotional when you see people living a dream, because 100% agree with what Joey said there. When you're involved in professional sport, and I have 100% been guilty of this, and as much as I miss Rugby League, one of the most eye-opening things has been stepping away from the sport. I'm in what I call a normal life. I have a normal working job. And you do get caught up in the bullshit. You think it's all about you. You do sort of have sometimes the attitude it's all about you. Us, the Warrington Wolves, the first team, it's all about us. You forget about everything else, what people are doing, the people who are working behind the scenes, people like yourself who are ambassadors and promoting the game and creating opportunities for everybody else.
But I would say part of that is necessary. I think to do what you did as a professional sports person, you've got to be a little bit blinkered. You've got to be, not ungrateful, but you've got to have tunnel vision. What makes you excel as a professional sports person. Absolutely. So, and I'm the same. I feel guilty when I look back at all the disability sport that I took for granted and didn't really realize. But a similar thing happened with Sean Briscoe. So Sean Briscoe, as you well know, represented his country in rugby league. He told me he was burnt out by the end of it. He didn't want anything to do with rugby. And then you know, he got involved with the Wolves and the foundation, and then he started coming down to our training sessions, and he played in our first game as an AB, and he absolutely loved it. And, you know, he's one of the main reasons that our team did as well as we did because of that. You're playing along, you know, for me personally, you're playing alongside someone who represented his country. The amount of stuff I've learnt from Sean, just from watching him, let alone from him taking me aside and going, listen, what you need to do is this and this and this. But also that competitive spirit that he has, there is absolutely no way he's going to lose when he gets on a field. Right down to the point where the last premiership, the grand final of last year, the very last play, there was a kick crossfield, Wakefield on our line. I think we were ahead 10-6. There was a kick on there, or maybe 10-4. There was a kick on their line, on our line. It was fielded, it was handed off to the winger, and as he put it down, it was knocked out of his hand, and it was knocked out of his hand by Sean Briscoe, who had sprinted, you know, and in one world, that's a terrible thing to do, to knock a ball out of a disabled kid's hands as he's about to score a try. But why is he doing it? He's doing it so another team of disabled blokes can lift a trophy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's what the able bodies are there for, but that's what Sean Briscoe, he went the extra yard so that we would be champions. So, you know, and I know from the Wolves, Steve Price has come down to watch us train a few times. Jason Clark, Sitter, Akaola has been down there. I think Jack Hughes. We've played before some of their games and they've watched us play as well. And, you know, I'd like to think that they get that as well, that they walk away from us and kind of go, yeah, do you know what? Those guys are giving everything. And it hopefully just an extra love of the sport.
Quick question then. What do you get the biggest buzz out of now then? Do you get the biggest buzz out of playing rugby league, or would you get the bigger buzz out of your stand-up comedy?
I mean, I've told my manager not to book any gigs on a Tuesday night because that's training. I turned down an invitation to Buckingham Palace for Prince Charles's 70th birthday celebrations because it was a Tuesday night and it was training.
Wow.
I decided not to do a stand-up comedy tour last year because it was more important for me to win a premiership with the Warrington Wolves PDRL team. I think it complements my stand-up, to be honest, because stand-up can get a little bit like what you were saying with rugby. You take it for granted a little bit. It becomes a bit of a drudge. You don't appreciate how lucky you are that you get to go on stage in front of 1,000 people. And instead you just go, oh God, where am I gigging this week? Where do I have to drive to? Who do I have to make laugh tonight? So, and I had a big chat of all people to Phil Jupitus about this, who used to be on Nevermind the Buzzcocks. And we were talking about this in Kilkenny about 1.5 years ago. And he was saying he was considering quitting comedy to do an art degree. He'd wanted to study art for 3 years. And his manager, who's my manager, managed to talk him into, not retiring completely. And I said, I know how you feel. Like for me right now, I'm more obsessed with rugby than I ever was, or than I am with stand-up. Probably, maybe I was in the beginning. And we just had this big conversation about sometimes it's good to just clear your head. It's good to, if all you do, and the other thing is, if all you do is tour and do stand-up comedy, then you've got nothing to talk about. You end up going on stage talking about the last gig that you did, or the hotel that you stayed in, or the train that you took to get there. And there are people watching it going, dude, I don't stay in hotels or do gigs. Talk about my life. So I did start doing a work in progress tour this year. I was meant to be doing shows, but they're all, cancelled because of the pandemic. So, but there's a big 15-minute bit of it where I just talk about Disability Rugby League and what I've learnt from it. So, yeah, at the moment, I mean, I don't go to bed dreaming of gigs, but I do go to bed dreaming of playing rugby league.
Yeah, I completely get it. Once you've got that bug, I think, it's hard to shake off. there's elements that I miss in rugby league, and I completely get what you say. I think no matter who we've had on the show, we've had top level sports people on, we've had comedians on, and everybody seems to have that thing that you do take the things that you do for granted because it becomes another day, and it's nice to take a step back and have other interests, away from what you do. Yeah, I mean, I try to do that myself because life does get boring, and I think you need that switch off as well from what you're doing. I think concentrating purely on one thing is, you can get burnt out for me. So it's great that you've got the rugby league side of it now. Do you have any other interests away from rugby as well?
I mean, at the moment, I guess my life is either making the last league, so making the TV show, or doing stand-up, or playing rugby, or I'm also writing a children's book at the moment, and I've become quite obsessed with that as well. So, especially, the last week and a half, I've had no work. I came to London for the last league, but I came early in case I needed to quarantine, which I didn't. But I've had no work on, so I've just been all day writing this children's book. So, I guess I kind of come and go. I get really obsessed is one word, I guess, with things, and I really want to do them and do them a lot, which is why I learnt that I should never do drugs. In much the same way, so there's a comedian called Ross Noble who I'm really good friends with, and he doesn't drink, and I asked him why, and he said because when I find something that I love doing, I do it a lot. I do it 200%. And if I enjoy drinking, I'll drink 200%. So I can't. So, I find I've got something to channel my energy into. And do you know what? In lockdown, I've just been in Melbourne. We had 3 months of lockdown and really only allowed out for an hour a day to exercise. And you couldn't go any further than 5 kilometers from your house. And I checked on Google Maps, the nearest rugby field was 4.8 kilometers away. So what kept me sane, honestly, was I went online, I bought 3 rugby balls and a kicking tee, and I would go down this field, I'd drive down, and I'd do some sprints, I'd do lengths of the field, and then I'd just kick for half an hour. Just practice my kicking, which was really, by the way, really hard for me because I'm right-footed, but my prosthetic is on my right foot. And I could never work out why. When I started kicking as a kid, I'd kick with the prosthetic. And then I got to about probably 10 or 12 and the prosthetic kept breaking because, the force of, as I got bigger, I was kicking harder and it kept snapping. So I had to teach myself to kick left-footed, but it's never felt natural. Oh. And I was talking to, of all people, Jonathan Davis about this at the Challenge Cup a couple of years back. And he said, no, I completely understand because I always kicked with my weaker leg because you need your strong leg to balance. I went, oh, right, of course, that makes perfect sense. But the prosthetics it's really hard to control the aim on it. I almost have to toe poke it and it sprays off in different directions. So I've been teaching myself to kick left-footed again, just in case my team need me. We've got kickers, but I'm there just in case.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
But that's what kept me sane during lockdown.
Yeah, mate, it's. I can't give you any advice on kicking. So speaking to the wrong person. Literally, just make a divot in the floor, put it down, and just toe poke it myself. So, yeah, I can't give you any advice on that. But funny, just going back to what you were saying then. Again, something that I pick up every single time I interview people who are at the top of the game. They seem to have this obsessive. This obsessive nature where they can't, it's all or nothing. It just resonates with me massively. And, knowing a lot of rugby players, it's and sports people, that seems to be a common thread with a lot of people, no matter what industry they're in. Top people who seem to reach the top have that obsessive nature.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to try and work out where that gene comes from, what it is that makes you do that. And look, I'd like to think that I don't obsess about stuff in a damaging way. I think I've got a fair amount of balance. Probably when I started doing stand-up, I was pretty yeah, I was pretty blinkered about it. I would, so interestingly enough, when I started with the first time I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, so that was always in August, I walked away from that and went, right, I want to do that. I want to get this right. And I would treat my entire year as if the Edinburgh Fringe Festival was the grand final. So I would take September off, and then October I'd start writing a new show, and I'd be over here in the UK. I'd be doing stand up, and bit by bit, every week I'd try out a new joke. And I even worked out that I think I needed to write maybe 4 minutes of material a week to give myself a new hour for the next comedy festival. And so I would slowly, bit by bit put this show together. And I remember I remember being with a girlfriend at the time, and I woke up with a joke in my head, and she was a comedian as well. And I kind of woke up and went, oh, and she went, what? And I'd been just drifting off to sleep, and I went, I just thought of a joke. And she said, what joke did you think of? And the joke was something, it was about, I've worked out why there's more obesity in America than in any other country in the world. And it's because in 1984, a group of English and British musicians put out a song that told us all to feed the world. And then a year later, a group of Americans put out a song that said, we are the world. And she said to me, you bastard, how are you dreaming of a joke that good? So now I the comedy, it's still there, and it's still, when I do a show, I obsess about it, and I have my my set list, and I go through, I'll do a show, and then I'll come back off and I'll look at the set list, and I'll put ticks next to each joke, like it's all in bullet points, about depending on how well the joke went. So if it only got a bit of a laugh, it gets 1 tick. If it's got a good laugh, it's 2 ticks. If it gets a really big laugh, it's 3. And if it gets a round of applause, I'll put a line through it. And then I'll look back on it every night and go, okay, that joke's not working anymore. In fact, that joke hasn't worked for 4 nights. Let's get rid of it. This one did tonight, but it didn't yesterday. What did I do differently? So you have to be, maybe obsessive's the word, but driven is another word. But, I don't know whether it attracts a certain type of person or whether it creates a certain type of person. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know whether the obsessive people make it to the top, or the more you do it, the more you realize that the best way to get to the top is to take it seriously and really kind of pour over it as you do it.
Yeah, again, like speaking to, just to name a few of the guests, Tony Adams, Ryan Giggs, Sean Edwards, Merton Afai, they've all reached the pinnacle of their sport, and they seem to have this obsessive drive. But I think the other key ingredients that come with it is resilience. And that's why I sort of touched on, how did you react when you did a gig and you didn't feel like it went down, and, the ability to bounce back from something that's not gone your way, basically. And I think I don't know, I'll call it the obsessive nature and the resilience, I feel like is 2 key ingredients for people who want to succeed, really.
And also I think the desire to bounce back, like I said, that first gig that I did or the second gig that I did, but it was the first one where I died. I could have walked away. I could have just gone, well, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. But there was the desire to go, right, no, I'm going to get this right. I'm going to keep doing this. What's that thing that, the sign of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But it's fascinating. And that's why, I'm fascinated by sports people. I've done a couple of gigs recently where one was in Ireland, and John Kavanagh was the guest I was doing like a comedy talk show. And John Kavanagh, who's Conor McGregor's coach, Coach Kavanagh, was the guest on the show. And he was backstage and he was watching myself and this other comedian pace up and down. And he said, you guys look like MMA fighters. And I went, well, that's the first time anyone's ever said that to me. And he went, no, he said, honestly, the way you guys are pacing, it's like being in the dressing room of an MMA fight. And I went, really? I said, except they're probably not shitting themselves as much as we are. And he went, oh, mate, I've had to pull people in through windows because they've tried to escape through bathroom windows because they don't want to fight. And then I did, a guy called John Lee, who was the CEO of the Rabbitohs, was in London, and he came to a gig, a little tiny gig that I did. There was no backstage, and he was watching me walk up and down beforehand. And he said, it's amazing how much you look like a sportsman. So there must be, there's a thing, and now I watch, I've been close to a lot of top sports people, but especially, around rugby league and around the Wolves. And there's a thing. I don't know what it is, but there's a thing. And so our coach, Will Maudsley, brilliant. He has nystagmus, so he has, eyesight issues, but he also plays able-bodied, and he's brilliant. And he's been playing since he was 4, and it's in his bones. We can watch a game of rugby league, and I'll go, well, that was a pretty good game. They did all right. And he'll go, no, they didn't. They did that wrong. He did that wrong. He was shit. That guy was shit. And I'm like, wow, you are watching this on a whole other level to me. He came down to London. We went to a stand-up gig, and afterwards he was like, oh my God, that was amazing. And in my head, I was thinking, no, it wasn't. He did that wrong. That's an old joke. He could have told that. So we've got a madness. I don't know what it is, but there's something in us that makes us want to be the best and want to bounce back. You're right. You're exactly right. It's fascinating. This series of podcasts should be submitted to a scientific study of some sort.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for myself, before a rugby game, I get it, like you're pacing up and down, and, I've been at the backstage of MMA fights, and I've seen fighters do that as well.
Yeah.
I've seen rugby players do it. And you're right. I think for me personally, I would get that nervous, and there was a fear of failure, of letting people down. Now, a lot of that was my drive looking back. I didn't want to let my teammates down. I didn't want to become a laughing stock. There was a fear of failure, so I'd be the same, pacing up and down. And is there an element of that with you, that you you don't want to let yourself down, and or the people around you, and you want to be perceived as, obviously you want to be perceived as a funny guy?
Yeah, it's more, I would say, it's not even that. It's because you're not going to let anybody else around you down because there's no team. It's just like, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? There were gigs. I used to host gigs in Edinburgh called Late and Live. They'd start at 1:15 in the morning to about 400 drunk Scottish people. And it was called the abattoir of comedy because it's where comedians went to be slaughtered. And the show would start, and especially when I started emceeing it, because I wanted to MC it, with like Marilyn Manson, the Beautiful People. So you'd hear it kick in, and the lights would go down, and the crowd would roar, and the ladies and gentlemen, and I'd be like, what am I doing? Well, just absolutely shitting myself. But I'm not. It wasn't like a fear of what if I'm not funny. It was more a fear of, oh my God, I can't deal with this. I can't, why am I doing? And then as soon as I walked on stage, all of that was gone. And you're like, okay, let's do this shit.
Yeah.
But I found a really interesting thing playing rugby league in that I had to learn not to be the fool, and not just the fool, the loser, because as a comedian, it's funnier if you're a loser. No, it's not funny if you're winning in life, but it's funny if you're getting things wrong. And I always cracked a little bit under pressure. Like even when I played competitive tennis, I would choke up. I would choke up and I would not be at my best. And the bigger the game, the more I would choke up. And so, but that's fine as a comedian because you can make a mistake and you can make it funny. That's absolutely fine. But when it came to rugby, I really had an internal battle with that mindset of you're not a loser, because it's all right to be a loser on stage because it's funny. And weirdly, it's all right to be a loser on a tennis court because it's only yourself that you've let down. But you can't be a loser when you're part of a team. You've got all them relying on you. So I kind of struggled with how to deal with that. And I think there was one game we played against Leeds, and I took an intercept with 30 seconds to go that won us the game. And it was pure instinct. It wasn't even me thinking, oh, I can see this coming, I'm going to take it. The ball just popped up and I grabbed it and ran. There was nothing, there was no planning about it. But it won us the game. And afterwards, I walked differently because I was like, I didn't stuff it up. I did it right. I helped us win a game. Like it was the first time in my life that had happened to me. And then the next game we played, our captain was injured. And so the coach took me aside and said, right, Hilsey, you're going to be captain this weekend. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm the idiot. I'm not a leader. I'm not a leader of men. I'm a joker. I'm a jester. I'm not a king. And he kind of said, look, you're already a leader on the field. Just keep doing what you're doing. But I kind of had to find that part of me that went, all right, don't stuff this up. You're not going to stuff this up. You have to, and I kind of gave a bit of a team talk and we ended up winning. And it completely changed my mindset about myself of, oh, I'm not a loser. Which is an amazing thing to discover about yourself when you're 49.
Yeah, mate. Do you know what? I speak about this quite regularly with people, and that self-sabotage where we can be quite negative to ourselves and sort of put ourselves down a little bit. And it's interesting that you say, I can't be captain, because from an outside point of view, I can imagine a lot of people looking up to you, and being that, even though you are a joker and you're a comedian, I can 100% guarantee that all those players in that team would have looked up to you. So it's interesting you have that opinion of yourself.
And even hearing you say that, I would never have considered that other players in the team would look up to me. Like maybe now that I've been around the team for a while and, have captains when needed to, and we've won a premiership and whatever else. But if you had told me that when Will said, right, you're going to be a leader, you're going to be the captain, if you'd said other people look up to me, that's part of the joy of doing stand-up comedy. That's why I love stand-up, is because it's just me on stage. There's no one else I'm responsible for. There's no one else that I can let down. There's no one else whose toes I can step on. There's no one looking up to me. There's no one expecting anything of me. It's just me and the audience. And I never did very well in comedy competitions. I would freeze up because I don't like that side of competing. It's just, comedy's a dance. It shouldn't be judged. You shouldn't be competing. So, it's been a personal journey. And again, that's what I love about sport. Like, the more, my wife's not really a sporty person, but when we sit down and watch and she knows the backstories and she knows, and you're kind of explaining whether it's the Paralympics or the Olympics or whatever, and we go, oh yeah, well that guy was out of the game for 2 years because of this injury, and now he moved to this team and blah, 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 blah. Once you know people's stories, sport becomes like as Claire Balding said, it's a soap opera. And a drama all at one.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on it that there's a massive community element to it, such a social gathering. But my kids all play sport, whether it's dancing, rugby, football, and for me, there's lessons to be learned in everything you do. And only this week, I had to have a word with my son because he's 12 years of age. He's going through the hormonal stage and he's shouting at all his teammates to do something and they're not doing it. And he's shouting and he's took his top off and thrown it on the field and walked off because he wants to win. And I said, I love your passion, but there's a communication element that's coming with this, and you need to communicate with people. Now, that's not just in sport, that's in life in general, So I feel like sport for me helped me grow up and become a better person, and hopefully it's made me a better communicator and have a little bit of empathy for people. And like I said, people who you play with and who you're around, the diversity is such a broad range. It's you get to meet so many great people.
We had a thing a couple of years ago. So I was hosting Stand Up to Cancer for Channel 4, and they hosted at this big old, I want to say Presbyterian hall in London, right in Westminster. And someone had the idea that we'd bring down some of the PDRL guys and we'd have some tackle bags set up with CANCER on it. We'd each tackle it. We were tackling cancer. And so one of the guys that writes with me on the last leg was there with me. And we'd been working on this all day. And then, Will and Jason and Tomo and the rugby lads turned up. And we all had a bit of a chat and a bit of a, hang out together. And afterwards, and we rehearsed our thing. And then afterwards, the guy that writes with me went, "Oh, mate, I'm so jealous." And I went, "What do you mean?" He went, "I wish I was part of a team. I wish I had a group of blokes that I could just hang out with outside of comedy, outside of work, that I could play a sport with, that I could joke with and just be myself with." And that's the friendships that I've made from this PDRL team and from rugby league generally in Warrington, they're going to be with me for the rest of my life. It was this really weird thing with lockdown. I've been in lockdown for 3 months in Melbourne. I got back to London last week. I was devastated to leave my wife and kids behind at home. And I got back and got a phone call from Sean Briscoe and then went, "Oh no, this is home." Around my Warrington lads, that's home.
Yeah, it is. And it becomes a family. It becomes, it becomes part of your life. It fills it. For me, certainly, it fills an hole. And, that's why I still keep involved in the Warrington Wolves, do hospitality on game day. And I take my son down to every single game. He's a mad Warrington fan now. So
yeah,
there's just something about rugby league that, and Briscoe's the same. When I speak to Sean, every time I spoke to Sean, when he'd retired from rugby, he'd had enough of the game.
Yeah.
But he's coaching his son, and then he gets involved in the Disability Rugby League team, and then he's announcing, and I'm like, "Sean, I thought you was pissed off with rugby and you needed something different." And he's like, "I know, it keeps drawing me back." And I'm like, "I'm exactly the same." I'm coaching an amateur team now in Wigan, and I'm, like I say, I do the hospitality at Warrington, and there's just something about the game that is special, and it's great to be involved in people like that. So, long may it continue, mate. And I'm hoping that I see you down at one of the Wolves games once the season starts again, in regular season.
I'm hoping you'll come down to training on a few nights.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, definitely.
Come and train with us.
Like I said, mate, I've qualified more than you, I think, at the minute. So, but 100%, mate, it'd be great to come down and watch the lads. And I know a few of the guys down there. So, it'd be good to come and watch you guys.
It. Well, Benny Westwood reckons he's going to start playing with us as an able-bodied player for this year onwards.
Yeah, well, Benny will do, because Benny's missing. I speak to Benny quite regular, and he's missing the game like mad.
Right.
So it's been just such a massive shock to him to step away from the game, and he's like, "I really miss it. And I'm like, "Mate, I get it, but hopefully he gets involved in that, and he's coaching as well now. So he's got all the responsibilities with the female team. So." Yeah, but mate, I'd love to come down and like I say, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a massive coup for us really to get you on, and love talking about Warrington as well. Tried not to make it too much about the Warrington Wolves, but it's hard not to, mate. It's hard not to. So, but yeah, mate, I really appreciate you coming on, and mate, it's been a great chat and got a good insight into your story there.
I've loved every second of it, and you honestly, you've got to submit this for scientific research, because there's got to be some way of working out what it is that makes people that driven.
100%, mate. Like I say, I can watch every single podcast, and there's a common trait with it. There's no matter what industry we're talking to, if we talk to the top engineer in the country, I think it'd be exactly the same thing. They'd be pacing up and down the offices like MMA fighters and nervous and stuff. So, but yeah, mate, thanks for coming on, and much appreciated. And I hope to catch you soon.
Yeah, absolutely loved every second of it. And I'll see you at training.
You will do. Cheers, Adam.
See ya.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Thank you.